Welcome back to the Retail Perch. I'm Courtney Adams, VP of Marketing for Birdseye. Today we're talking about something that touches every retailer and every CPG partner, but rarely gets said out loud in the room. Trade funding, and whether the way we've always done it still makes sense. So here's the premise I want to put on the table right away. The future of CPG funding isn't about selling more ad inventory, it's about funding measurable customer growth. That's a different conversation than the one most in the industry are having right now, and I think that's exactly why it's worth having here. I'm joined by two amazing people, Kate McCormick, Director of Solution Engineering at Birdseye, and Gary Hawkins, author, grocery retail expert, and Birdseye advisor. Kate and Gary, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for
Yeah,
having us.
yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for having us.
Well, wonderful. Well, let's get into it. So, first question, has CPG funding become too focused on funding promotions instead of growing customers?
Oh boy.
Okay, go ahead and lead us off.
Sure. I would say in short, yes, absolutely. CPG funding and trade funding has been the sort of never-ending cycle within retail as a whole, and probably one of the least innovative areas, or where there's been the least amount of innovation to make them be spent better. Gary, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, trade funds from day one has always been used to simply sell more product, right?
Right.
The customer has really never been in focus. If you look back just quickly at sort of how the industry developed, when self-service supermarkets really came into being, back in the 40s, 50s. It was in conjunction with the development of the first national broadcast networks, both television and radio, that date back to the mid 40s. And why that's important is you put those two things together for the first time, shoppers were going up and down the aisles making their own purchase decisions. So
Hmm.
it became very important for the brands to promote their brand and effectively say to the shoppers, buy me. So that really drove the development of what we think of as trade funding today. And early on, it was used to really buy shelf space, slotting in the warehouses, distribution centers, and then shelf space in the stores. As advertising developed, the proverbial weekly ad, trade funds were used to procure, front page placement, maybe inside placement, special displays in the store, and so on. But again, the customer was never really in any of that focus.
So, are we actually optimizing spending here or optimizing for spending and calling it strategy?
I think that's an excellent question. I think that in order to optimize spend full stop, you have to consider the customer. Gary, what's the number one metric that all CPGs use for trade funding?
So sales,
Yep, and
right?
units related to that. And I think that in terms of strategy, that's what it's been placed on. And I think that there are a lot more avenues and a lot more tactics to use trade funds a little bit more strategically.
Oh, I would say there's a lot of room to use trade funds more
Maybe I was being
strategically.
subtle, right?
Um, yeah, the sort of metric that's always been used continues to be used as sales,
Hmm.
but I think both retailers and brands have always had a challenge with identifying, a true incremental sales lift from a promotion, right? There's always been argument around the best way to do that, the effectiveness of those measures, and so on, to the point that a lot of retailers or a lot of CPGs just sort of give up. You
Right.
know, we ran these promotions in this week or this month last year. Let's do it again this year. And there's an awful lot of that that goes on in this industry.
And it doesn't have to be that way, especially with all of the data available and all of the different tactics. I mean, if you look at the way people are spending or CPGs are spending trade funds today, like Gary said, it started with, shelf space and promotions and end caps, but it's expanded to personalization, to retail media, and even for shopper insights, data and collection of that. So I think that I would say in terms of where it needs to change, it probably needs to change not just with the retailers or sorry, not just with the CPGs themselves, but with the retailers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kate, to the point you just called out,
Mhm.
there's a lot of data available today,
Right.
right? And, across a good number of retailers, there's shopper data, shopper identified transaction data that opens the door to not only measuring the lifetime value of that customer for the retailer, but we can also now look at the lifetime value of that customer for the brand at that retailer. And I think that it opens the door to a whole new world of how to both use, marketing dollars and how to measure the effectiveness of that spend.
Oh, great point. It drives me bananas when all of the CPGs and the retailers, their number one starting point is what did we do last year? And it's not followed with, did it work?
Right.
And even if there's an argument about how you can measure promo effectiveness or not, you can at least, at the very, very least, measure customer lifetime value and if that promotion helped or hurt it. And even that's not being done.
Yeah. No,
So,
that's right. It's not. Um, I think though what's happening, you look at how retail media dollars have grown significantly, right,
Yeah.
over the last 5 years. And it's now a major bucket of money that a lot of retailers are chasing. What I think has driven the rise of retail media dollars is for the first time, brands were able to better measure where that money was going and
Hmm.
the effectiveness of it. Right? The biggest retailers, I'll point to Kroger as a great example, right? Were able to and are able to tell the brand, here's the audience, here's how many people were targeted, here's how many people saw that promotion online or email, whatever the channel was. Here's of them how many actually went into the store or shopped online, and here's how many people converted and actually purchased your brand. For the first time, everyone, both retailers and the CPGs, were able to understand what that spend produced in terms of results.
Yep. And Courtney, just to try to get back to the saga that is trade fund and CPG funding, Gary, you mentioned that retailers these days are chasing those dollars. And as we're uncovering more and more and kind of connecting the dots across the various tactics that trade funds are being used for, I think it's a classic case of them chasing their own tail. Because a lot of those promo dollars that they're thinking is new money created through having a retail media platform is just a shift from one bucket to another, and it's the same amount.
That is absolutely true, Kate. I think it is only the very largest retailers, an Amazon, a
Yeah.
Walmart, maybe a Target, Costco, that are of the size and scale to actually get true incremental dollars, right, from retail media. For many other, nearly all other retailers, it is, as you say, the same dollars that are being repackaged, right? For that regional retailer, there's only so many dollars. Do you want to call it trade promotion? Do you want to call it shopper marketing? Do you want to call it digital? Do you want to call it retail media? Your choice, but the dollars are the same.
so what are those traditional, the trade calendar, the circular, the mass offer models, retail media even, what are they assuming about the shopper that isn't really true anymore?
Kate?
I would say what they're assuming the shopper that isn't there anymore. Probably just overall extreme fragmentation of the shopper. One promo is not going to keep your shopper there. It's meant for short term. And I think just probably there were probably in terms of marketing calendars a lot more emphasis on long term as well. And I think that there's some false assumptions that can be made there.
Yeah, so completely agree. There's absolutely fragmentation going on. We read about it every week in the trade press. More shoppers shopping more channels, and certainly the economic challenges today are just further exacerbating that.
So why is, or should, I guess is what we're saying, why should customer behavior matter more necessarily than product movement and how this funding is getting decided?
I think from my perspective, it's just the addition of consistency. So if you focus in units, you have just one unit being purchased and then another unit. Customers what strings those units together, and that's what creates a consistent buying pattern that you can then more accurately forecast, you can more accurately plan for. If you're trying to emphasize big unit booms and not kind of considering the taper of what the customer does to create that consistency, you're not getting the comprehensive understanding of what your strategy should be doing and what it's capable of accomplishing.
Yeah. And, I think sales and units remain important metrics, right? I mean, at
Absolutely.
the end of the day, that's what drives business.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just like from a retailer's perspective, it's important now for brands to look under that top line of sales to understand where those sales are coming from, right? And, take two extremes, you could have $1,000 of brand sales coming $1 at a time from 1,000 customers that are constantly churning. Or you could have $1,000, coming from 10 customers buying $100 worth of that brand over, some period of time. And I would certainly say that I think that latter scenario, more loyal shoppers of that brand, is more profitable for the brand and also more profitable for the retailer.
Yep, and I kind of changed my answer, add on to my answer that you asked before, Courtney, with the idea of the consistency and the idea of learning and who your brand loyal shoppers are. There's a huge need these days compared to kind of what it was, say, 2, 3, 5 years ago to protect that because the ability and the, connection with switching is so much more higher than what it used to be. I mean, we talk about some of the core brands like Kleenex. These days, people aren't loyal to Kleenex. They're loyal to, and there's probably, I'm probably overstating there, but there's plenty of people that are loyal to Kleenex, but it's a lot harder to keep them loyal to Kleenex versus finding another tissue. And I think that's one of the things that's a common misnomer with, CPG and retailer planning. The eye on the prize is always acquisition, more customers, more customers, more customers,
Yeah.
which is covering what Gary's saying. There is a need, and sales and units are certainly important, but it becomes harder and harder to get more and more customers if your current loyal customers continue to get lower and lower. You're kind of moving the mark on what your growth opportunity looks like.
Yeah,
So that sets me
absolutely.
up perfectly for, we talk a lot about where this conversation happens and often in a joint business planning session. What is actually being negotiated? If we're not looking at real growth or true growth and customer lifetime value, are we just negotiating trade dollars?
Go ahead,
So,
Gary. You
so many times, yes, they're simply negotiating over, hey, this retailer did this much in sales with that brand last year. And, maybe they get as far as, hey, here's the average selling price per item, number of units, et cetera. And the retailer got X amount of dollars in trade funds. What's it going to look like this year? And again, oftentimes there's no discussion around the customer or the shopper.
Wow, I mean, that's significant. If they are looking at data, whose data are they looking at? And does the other side of the table ever really see what movement's really happening?
Depends on the retailer, I would say. So there are some, the Krogers of the world, the Albertsons, they have more data in a accessible, collected way. So they're able to bring more data as a retailer to the CPG to have those actual discussions. I would say if there are certainly, and this kind of a lot of times happen at a regional level where there's less collected data at a retailer level, and that really kind of sets the retailer up to hear what the CPG wants to be planning, and then the discussion and sort of negotiation kind of falls flat.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would just expand a little bit that, the retailers, depending upon the size of them, has their data that they'll share.
Hmm.
Here's how this category is doing, here's how your brand within that category is doing, our overall business, and so on. The larger retailers will use, market share data from a Nielsen or a Circana or a Numerator or whoever, they'll potentially factor into it. But again, it's the customer is sort of nowhere to be found in that,
You're
right?
so right.
I think more and more of the discussions over the last several years have also included, oh, we've got this new retail media capability, right? That we can do to, promote your brand to our shoppers when they're out on the internet, or we can reach them in store with this new cool thing. But
You're so
it's,
right. And
it's not the
especially with
customer.
the money, it's like there's two questions. Well, there's two parts to the story or two sides of the story. The CPG comes in and says, here's what I'm willing to spend with you, and this is how I'm looking to spend it. And then the retailer comes in and says, great, I'd love you to spend money with me. And then here's some other additional ways that you can spend their money. But there's no at any point in your time, it's not like inherent conversation to say, these are what your customers are doing. This is where
Right.
your needs are met. This is where their needs are unmet. And this is how you can spend your money wisely for the customer, not to go and get, a check from you at the end of the day. It's bananas.
Yeah. No, I think there is a significant opportunity for retailers today to shift the discussion, right? To
100%.
bring customer-based metrics to the table, to those joint business planning meetings, and begin sort of opening up that discussion around, yeah, here's traditional sales units, et cetera. But more importantly, here's what's happening at a shopper level.
Yes, this is what's happening across the categories. So from a CPG perspective, they're coming in with the data for, kind of or not narrow-minded, but just with the blinders on of this is what's going on in this category. This is what my share of wallet should be, blah, 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 blah. And without the retailer data or without that kind of comprehensive view as Gary's talking about, they have no way of knowing whether or not that shopper is still shopping at that retailer, just not buying that product, or just not buying in that category, or what the other external factors are kind of needed to be considered.
Yeah.
So, what changes when both sides are looking at the same data at the same time with the same goal and purpose before the decision gets made and not after?
Yeah, and it's the goal. You hit it right there, Courtney. The right now, the way that joint business planning happens, the retailer comes in with their goals, which is often at a category perspective, and then the CPG comes in with their goals, which is often at a unit perspective. Both equal sales, but the way to get sales are completely different. And then you're kind of having more of an argument or a negotiation on what weight each of those goals should be placed, or how those goals should be looked at. rather than if they both were like, I want to keep this customer, or I want to grow these types of customers, then you have the common goal, you've got the common metrics, both equal sales, but you're focusing on the human being aspect, which is the core reason units are sold or categories are grown. And you have that common place of, consistency and conversation.
Yeah, and I think that, when you bring the customer into the equation around, joint business planning or joint value creation, it absolutely shifts the discussion because now both the retailer and the brand can look at and measure the effectiveness of that trade promotion spend, right? What did it actually do? Did it get new customers to the brand? Did it get new customers to the category? Did it simply reward people with additional savings that were going to buy the brand anyway? Or did it actually drive some kind of incremental business? It opens up all those new metrics. But at the end of the day, I think what's important is it gives both the retailer and the brand a very different way now to look at their business and measure the effectiveness of that spend.
Yeah, and so many more relevant solutions. So if you're looking at a unit and you're taking the person away from it, I mean, you could do tons of stuff with trying to move a unit. Is it going to matter to anybody? Who knows? Maybe just a
Yeah.
small amount of the people that they're trying to get. But, I go back to the classic promos of buy one, get one free, or two for this number, this many dollars. If you're not including the customer and having a better understanding of what's going in the basket and how people are spending for that specific item over time, you might be putting out a promotion that makes zero sense in the world of the customers you're trying to get or the customers you're trying to retain.
Yeah. And Courtney, I would also say I think now's the time for this kind of shift. Um, everyone's feeling pressure, right?
Oh, yeah.
Retailers are being pressured, the brands are being pressured, customers are being pressured. So the environment really is almost begging for, you know, increasing relevancy in marketing, increasing the relevancy of savings opportunities for the shopper. And I think there's another driver in here that doesn't get talked about too much, but there's just an article I was seeing somewhere recently. It may have been on Wall Street Journal, but it was calling out that many of the big brands are under increasing scrutiny from Wall Street
Oh,
around the effectiveness of their massive marketing spend, right? You look at the big CPGs, and you'll often see, if you look at their financials, you'll often see that marketing is in some cases 20%, in some cases even more than 20% of that CPG's total revenue. It is the largest single expense after cost of goods sold. And Wall Street is zeroing in on this, saying, hey, you're under pressure, you're spending, massive amounts of money in marketing. What are you getting back for it, brand? And, I think what we're talking about here, opening the door to a different way to measure, to look at all this spending is the time is now.
and to your point of the time is now, I want to go and, emphasize that as well. In the past, and even, I mean, the past meaning 3 years ago, takes a considerable amount of time to pull all of that data together in a comprehensive way and trying to go and connect all of those dots. I mean, we all know the human, just as it stands, is a very complicated thing. So there's a lot of reasons why they make a lot of choices, myself included. And I think the time is now, to your point, Gary, is because AI is getting to that point and getting to a really great place where what could take 6, 8 months, in order to go and pull some of these conversations together,
Yeah.
you would need that amount of time just to get the data in a place where it's an actionable insight. And now, I mean, we've done it in a day or two.
Yes.
So it becomes a much more fluid conversation. It has much more back and forth, and that's how you get to the best ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other, just to build on that, Kate, it's absolutely easier to bring all that data together today and understand it and have those discussions around it. But more and more, the insights coming out of that are becoming automated execution,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And, I think, again, that just points to the need for the brands and retailers to shift the discussion here to really begin to focus on the shopper and what's relevant for them, what's the best way to spend all this money. As we just said, shoppers are looking for relevancy, they're looking for savings on stuff they want and need to buy. The retailers need to do that because they're under pressure, and certainly the CPGs.
It's the Retail Perch, presented by Birdseye, where grocery meets actionable intelligence.
So it sounds like the conversation needs to move maybe to a more honest point in whether trade spend is actually working and what happens. I mean, it sounds like, 20% of their budget, like, or 20% of their revenue. Where does that money go? Does it just disappear? How are we able to help retailers at Birdseye? How are we able to help retailers and CPGs make sense of that investment and what's coming out of that, of their campaigns?
I think there's two ways. So one, making sure each tactic or campaign or marketing, you know, budget related action is held accountable and measured for. So you're able to clearly show, I spent this X amount of money and I got this much in return. Related to the customer as a whole, units and sales as part of that, but what am I doing for that customer to secure me not just in the short term of that campaign, but the long term success of the brand itself? And then I would say the second piece would be to not think of each of those campaigns as singular items, to have them connect together into a proper communication marketing strategy so that each campaign has a role to the greater purpose of how I'm spending X amount on marketing as a whole, and each of the kind of tactics has a contribution to achieving that.
Yeah. Yeah. Courtney, for much of the last century, marketing funds, trade promotion funds, et cetera, have been a black hole,
Mm-hmm.
really for the industry, right? Certainly for the CPG, but also for the retailer, and sadly, it was, well, gee, we ran these promotions this week last year, we'll do that again this year. And here's the price point we need to hit this year. But, where that money went, what it resulted in, was typically not measured, right? Just how were the sales that week? In today's world, certainly with a company working with Birdseye, there should be full transparency on those dollars, where they went, who received those promotions, what did they do, what change in behavior did it create, what change in value creation did they create?
Yep. We're doing a lot of understanding of different, not only economic situations within the consumers, but also health related. So GLP-1 is obviously one of those big trends, driving a lot of like the protein heavy type of snacks and type of baskets. And so I think, on the front end of, okay, what does that mean for growth? There's also that understanding of, okay, how do I protect it? What if I'm a CPG that doesn't fit into the GLP-1 trend? What does that mean? And it's kind of understanding and trying to figure that out too. And I think Birdseye can truly help with what that means as well and give that transparent view of what growth might look like and the avenues that may need to be focused on more heavily.
So when we're talking about tools and what's available now, we briefly, I think, Kate, you mentioned AI. Where can AI actually help here? Speed, strategy, both, more than that?
Go ahead, Gary. I want to hear your response.
So I think all that and more. uh, Courtney, right? It certainly helps with, I mean, it's only because of AI that a retailer can now market to the individual customer incredibly effectively, right? In a timely manner. It automates that process. It dramatically speeds it up, making it almost literally real time from behavior to how should I respond to that behavior. Um, the ability to look at vast amounts of data far beyond what a person or even a army of persons can look at and analyze and then actually take action on. So AI is changing the world, and it's absolutely changing retail marketing and merchandising.
Agree. I'm a sucker for anything that I call it saving souls or saving lives. So within every corporate individual, there are a series of tasks that they feel like they just have to do. And it can often either get in the way of being able to be reactive, or it could get in the way of spending time on much more valuable inputs related to strategy. You're just stuck doing these things you don't they're not value less, but they're value light. And I think that having AI helps remove that. I think it saves lives and saves souls in that space. So you can put your brain and the individual's skill set, experience, expertise into a much stronger impact for the business.
Yeah. And just building on that, Courtney, I would add to that. I think my suggestion for retailers would be to really not worry so much about, well, gee, am I getting, another 10,000 or $100,000, whatever, for this retail media campaign, as it is to understand what the broader trends are here and putting in place the ability to capture all the necessary data and then the tools to make use of that data, right? And to provide the transparency, the full attribution of measurement that some of the biggest retailers are providing. Because I think what we're seeing happen is the brands now working with a Kroger, with a Walmart, with an Amazon are seeing for the first time, oh, we really can measure exactly where our marketing dollars are going and what they're producing. And they're learning from that on the retail media side, and we're seeing that now migrate to trade promotion, sharper marketing spending. Hey, if you can measure what you're doing over here in retail media, why can't you measure what we're doing on trade promotion,
And it's
right?
a real responsibility that
Oh,
I think the
absolutely.
retailers should have,
Yes.
especially if think about it in the sense of financial advisement. If the retailer, if they're saying, okay, I collected this $100,000 in your example to spend on retail media, I feel strongly that there should be a real responsibility of showing when I collected it, this is what came out of it. And I would challenge every retailer to make sure that that happens, because that's how you get more. That's how you build the trust.
Yes.
Just like within a retailer, am I getting more value as a customer? This is where I'm going to want to keep going.
Yeah. Well, and I would even go further and say that I think retailers need to put these capabilities in place to simply retain the trade dollars they're
Great point.
getting today, let alone trying to get more,
Oh, absolutely. Because where's
right?
it going to go if it's not a good spend?
That's
Amazon or
right.
Walmart?
Yes.
Oh,
And absolutely. From a CPG perspective, they're looking at the profitability of that channel, the profitability of that retailer, right? And they absolutely are making those decisions around, where do we invest marketing dollars for the best return?
So, what are we measuring today versus like impressions, redemptions, and what should we really be looking at when it comes to customer lifetime value?
yeah. I mean, to me, impressions and redemptions are a little soft. I would say more it needs to shift more towards behavioral and not just within a campaign window, but what did that happen over time?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, it's, I think that is when I started in the advertising world, it was all about our objectives would be like educating customers, drive awareness. You can't get away with that anymore, especially in the retail setting. And I think slowly but surely, the impression piece is probably the next one to have some rigor around and put a critical eye towards.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to the industry has to work towards full transparency on that spend, right? There's simply too many dollars at play um, to not have that transparency. And as I say, on the CPG side, I think Wall Street is pressuring the CPGs to measure that effectiveness and report on that effectiveness. On the retail side, I think they have to, just from a profit perspective, make sure they're spending that money in the best way possible to drive their business.
It's just like the same if you were just a regular, not outside of the corporate setting. If you have a financial advisor or something, some kind of person that's helping you make investments, it's not like you're going to give them a hunk of money and be like, best of luck, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
Especially if you're under an immense amount of pressure um,
Yeah,
to either grow it or have proof that it's a stable, solid investment or reason to keep doing this. It's kind of the same exact scenario. And Gary, with your news of CPGs having more kind of pressure from Wall Street with trying to reconcile why this spend and where is it going and what are you getting, I think that's going to only heighten the amount of kind of question marks and need for solidified places it's going to and return it's getting.
yeah.
So, what is something outside of talking to Birdseye and obviously being a partner of ours? We care about our partners very much, meet with them weekly, make sure their strategy is aligned with their goals. What are some things outside of working with our incredible company that people can do to start making more sense out of what's actually happening versus what they're hoping has happened?
So I guess, for the retailers, it's yeah, maybe education, right? It's certainly reading, it's understanding what's happening here, it's understanding the trends in the marketplace, it's understanding what technology can do for them today and what technology is enabling today. Because it is absolutely changing the game. The days of trade promotion spend just being a black hole are really gone, or it should be gone. Um, and I think the days of retailers sort of looking at trade funds as almost a shell game um, are also rapidly going away. And what that implies is also full transparency on the retailer side, right? Knowing that, hey, I moved this many units, at my full regular retail, it would have produced this in sales. We discounted, this item, this brand, this week for that promotion. Here's the bite that took out of that margin for us.
So, if the next evolution of CPG funding isn't buying more promotions or more media, but continuously, it sounds like you're saying, both of you, that it's continuously investing in the right customer at the right moment, and then measuring that growth by changes in customer behavior and not just campaign activity. That sounds like a tall order if we've been doing something the same for 100 years.
I honestly think it's just a shift in mindset.
Mm,
If you're coming into this, um, you know, come into it with a mindset that maybe you don't have the best answer, you have a answer, but question everything and connect anything that you can. So then that way you're able to constantly be in this state of there's always room for improvement. I mean, that's why psychology and therapists of a thriving business. There's always room for improvement. Find those pieces, find that area, and be part of the evolution. Don't kind of rely on traditional ways. And I think that retail and specifically is at that point where thinking of it in a new mindset, just kind of put that rigor behind, okay, this is the process that we take. Why? What are we getting out of it? What's the purpose of it? Do we need it? And start kind of decluttering.
Yeah, the data, the tools, the measurements, the execution capabilities, they're all there today. So I agree with Kate. It really comes down to a mind shift here. And, to me, it needs to begin on the retailer side and then flow across to the CPGs, because it's really the retailer's data that can enable all this. Um, but in far too many retailers, they still are working from a product driven, product focused view of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you the retailers I speak to, I'll start asking them, how business is, and they'll say, well, sales are this or that, or up or down or whatever. Our customer count is this or that, and this is a review without loyalty. So when they say customer count, like, do you really mean transactions? Oh yeah,
Right.
transactions. And yet for decades, retailers have used customers as a synonym of transactions, and they're two very different things. So beginning to think in customer terms is a fundamental mind shift.
Yeah, and it's only overwhelming if you try to do it all yourself. So, and our retailer partners are testament of that. There are so many with such a high volume, high frequency industry like retail. There are so many different things and different components and different pieces and parts that you have to think about and get them all to work together towards, various goals and set yourself up for growth. I don't think I've ever heard of a retailer that said, "We would like to stay the same as last year, thank you."
Yeah.
So being able to count on your partners, to have partners that hold themselves just as accountable as you do as the retailer, and be vulnerable, be open to thinking about the solution together. I would say that that's probably the strongest recipe for success.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So, Gary, you talked about what we've been doing for 100 years. Kate, we're talking about what is possible now. 5 years from now, what does success look like for a retailer and a CPG for this problem that we're discussing?
What are
Go
your
ahead,
thoughts?
Kate.
Really? Okay. 5 years from now, I would hope for a more fluid conversation. So I know that CPGs, meet with retailers on a weekly basis. A lot of it is like, what am I going to do next week, or what's the next planning period? And all in these predefined kind of campaign calendars, be it marketing or merchandising. It would be nice to have strategy be more of that regular conversation and not so tactical. And I think that we can get there through the help of AI and the help of more accessible, transparent data.
Yeah. So I think the word fluid is a good one to characterize what this needs to look like, looking a few years out. And I think that also sort of buttresses the idea of where technology is taking us, right? Of automating more and more functions across the enterprise, especially in marketing, right? And that combined with the notion that we can truly market to the individual customer today incredibly effectively. You marry that up with fluidity in those discussions, the partnership between the retailer and that CPG vendor, all based around the customer and optimizing customer lifetime value for the retailer and for the brand. I think there can be really exciting times ahead.
And I know this is a PG podcast, we know stuff happens. And I think that retailers and CPGs, while they did know it, when the stuff happened, just kind of you cross your fingers and hope for the best and hoped it would get over quick. I would hope for the next 5 years when that stuff does happen, there's a lot more quicker reaction and more confident response to when that does. So in Cincinnati, where I'm based, we had some recent flooding happen that no one could have predicted. It was just a regular rain shower that got a little out of hand, which affected a lot of different businesses, affected a lot of different retailers. I would hope in 5 years from now, the response wouldn't just be kind of chaos, but it would be more, okay, this stuff happened. Let's figure out together in 30-minute call how we should respond.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think maybe a word you could use, Kate, is an orchestrated response.
There you go. Yes.
Right. Between the retailer and the brand and the customer.
Right.
And again, more and more of these capabilities are going to be automated within certain guardrails, right? And the ability to react almost in real time to different incidences, whether it's a weather incident or something else, but that there shouldn't be any surprises. Right, because now the retailer and the brand can be looking at real-time data as far as how's that promotion doing, how's that campaign doing, how's it producing results, and so on.
Which is crazy, Gary, because if something like this happens, now imagine the current way of working where they're like, oh, we'll just look back to last year and see how this did.
Yes.
Where it's like, well, a flood happened. I mean,
yes.
Let's hope we don't have last year on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's always the mysterious Easter. So Easter's a holiday that switches every year, and it throws every retailer and CPG off guard every single year.
Yep, absolutely. Is it beginning of the month? Is it the end of the month? Yeah.
Kate, Gary, thank you both so much for being honest about where the industry currently stands and where it needs to go. That is all for this episode of The Retail Perch. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Retail Perch. Follow us on LinkedIn at The Retail Perch for new episodes and updates. For more resources, visit birdseye.com. Catch you next time.